That's a good one. What did I say? I'm gonna get one that's gonna catch me off guard and absolutely smoke the thing. Come on. There we go. Oh, he rolled in my line. Come here. Come here. Now, normally, I typically don't drink lake water, but I've been on like a weird, it's not keto, it's a yucco diet. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, look how pasty she is. We had a storm out here and the water's been real dirty, and you can see the pigment of the bass just lightens up a ton. Real ghost looking. Got it right there in that Neko rig. We'll slide it down. It's got that little German mustache deal going there. Adorable. I like it. Oh my goodness. She wasn't going anywhere. All right guys, so while I'm throwing a Neko rig right out here, we've had a real hard cold snap where my lake here that I live on's dropped about 5 degrees in the last week. We've had some super cold nights, and there's still some stringy grass, a lot of like ponds that you go to, and out here on the west, we got a weed called sago pondweed, and it's really light and stringy to where if you throw a reaction bait or a bait with a little bit of weight, it's kind of hard to snap it free of that grass without it coming with your lure. So one of the most weedless rigs you can ever possibly throw is a Neko rig. And it's a weedless exposed hook, which is kind of like the best of both worlds. In cold water, you may not feel a finicky bite. Well, that exposed hook, the fish starts swimming off with it. He gets the hook point. That fish lets you know all of a sudden, hey, I'm hooked, and it takes off. Just like the last one, I didn't even know I had that fish. I would love to take credit, say, hey, I timed it. I felt it come up and blow on it, but I didn't. Now, the Neko rig here, this is actually the DS crawler. This is made by Savage Gear. You guys are really gonna like this. It's got a big flat side on one side of it and rounded, and it progressively tapers off to a really nice little spear point on the end of the hook there. So I have that Neko rig hooked on the flat side of that worm to where even if I just maintain tension the whole time, this thing's gonna slide through that grass and that flat side's gonna catch a lot of water to where a Neko rig's almost like a vertical wacky rig presentation, and the back of that hook moving through the grass, that serves as a weed guard. So whether you're from a boat or out there bank fishing, if you guys have never put a Neko rig in your hand, especially when it gets cold, the bite gets tough, it's a phenomenal way to put a lot of fish in the boat quick. All right guys, now the reason I'm finesse fishing out here today, you know, the water temperature drops too much, you get some heavy rains, the water gets chalked up, the fish kind of just get lethargic and sitting there. So a bait like a Neko rig right there can really just hang in their face. It's ultra finesse, it gets their attention. There's a lot of movement without the bait actually progressing forward in the water column. So we all hear about spending time in the strike zone. Neko rig is absolutely fantastic for it when it gets tough out there. So I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of insider information about retrieving a Neko rig. So when you're pulling, your hook's actually going like this. So let's say the bass chomps down on it, and all of a sudden you feel that fish. Well, if you're pulling your worm forward and you set up, you may actually pull that hook away from that fish. Now, I know you've all used a crankbait that's watching this, okay? I'm gonna cast it out there. Now, when we're reeling a crankbait, we always got our rod tip down. Well, I always retrieve a Neko rig down, and you always wanna maintain line tension. You don't want slack in there. Line tension actually keeps that hook in that correct position to keep it weedless, and line tension alone is moving that worm more than you think. Oftentimes, it's the perfect speed to retrieve it. So I'm often gonna shake it, but just like I said with that crankbait, when the fish gets it, I'm going to reel tight and I'm gonna just increase the tension. It's just like reeling faster with a crankbait and pulling down. You're trying to make forward progress, not vertical progress, to where if he bites it and I go, whew, a big old 90-degree hook set, believe it or not, you'll lose way more fish like that on a Neko rig versus just progressing your rod tip forward and increasing the tension. And a little side bonus to that, if they happen to miss the hook, they just felt like it was something natural trying to get away, it pops loose, it lands right there in front of them, and you get second chance opportunities as well. All right, guys, I'm gonna show you how I rig up this Neko rig right here. I have that DS crawler that I was just telling you about with that flat side. Now, a lot of people use like O-ring tools for your Senko style baits, you know, your big stick worms, but a lot of the time, we want a Neko rig little skinny worms. So you're gonna look what's right here in my hand. I have 2 daughters, so I was one of those dads, and I'm Shaky Hands McGee that was trying to tie hair, do little ponytails, and they have these great little poly rubber bands that you could just work around a bait. I go about 2 to 3 times, 3 times, you know, usually for your thinner worms, and I roll it up. Now I'm gonna give you a little rule to abide by here. When you're Neko rigging, where you want your hook is normally around 2/3 of the way up on your worm. But when you have a long skinny taper, you can almost go directly in the middle like a wacky rig. You can see I rolled it up. You see that little thick knob right there? The only thing I'm gonna do when I bring that hook in is I'm gonna go to that flat side of that worm and I'm gonna skin hook the worm under that rubber band. I don't want just my hook going onto the rubber band. I want that hook going barely through the skin of the worm and out the other side. Let me rig it and show you. So now when it comes to putting in your nail weight, so this is a 3/32 right here. Now I'm not gonna use the full nail. I'm gonna break it off probably a little bit over halfway. And I'm gonna give you a little secret. I'm just gonna push it in the tip of the worm. This is no secret. Everybody knows you shove the nail weight right into the end of the worm. But the secret is when you're retrieving that worm, you wanna make sure when you're reeling the worm through the water column, you cast it out in front of you, cast it 5 foot out there and reel, you wanna make sure that your worm is in that 90-degree position as you're reeling it back to the boat. If your worm's twisting and turning, you have too little of weight. So now what this does is as you're reeling, you'll see your worm actually stay in this position with your tail upright and it'll just come along. Too light, it'll turn, it'll twist out. Now you can be certain when you're down there dragging it on the bottom, your hook shank is also at that perfect position to serve as a weed guard coming through the grass. Too light a weight, it'll reel in sideways, your worm will twist and turn. Just the right amount of weight, it'll stay perfectly 90 degrees as you reel it back to the boat.